Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Pearl Jam Knits. My name is Emily. I'm a knitter crocheter based out of Denver, Colorado, and this is my knitting podcast where I share any current projects I'm working on, any finished objects I might have completed, and any yarn acquisitions I may have made, and the plans that I might have for those yarn acquisitions. So today I do have a finished object. You might notice that I'm wearing it. This is my step-by-step sweater by Florence Miller. I completed this with Caron Macchiato Cakes in the colorway Boundless. So the step-by-step sweater is an Aran weight pattern. It is a top-down raglan construction sweater that features 1x1 rib details. It also has two options for the collar. I opted for the double folded collar. However, you can also complete a funnel neck collar, which is sort of like a mock turtleneck. It's like it would come up a little bit higher than this collar does, and it's a single layer instead of two layers folded over itself. It does also feature the option for German short rows, so I did include the German short rows with mine. You can kind of see where I came up close to the front and then turned back around for the final German short row. And those are just to boost up the back of the collar a little bit to give it a little bit more of a comfortable fit. Modifications I made were to crop this. I did crop it pretty significantly, hopefully you can tell. I just wanted it to hit right at the waistline of my high-waisted pants and jeans. And I also added some length to the sleeves, and that's just because I naturally have really long arms. And I did include 2 additional decrease rounds than the pattern calls for in order to give the sleeve cuff a slightly more tapered look. However, this is not far off from what the pattern looks like as written. So those are the only modifications I made. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention. This does also feature Italian bind off at the sleeve cuffs and the hemline. If you're not familiar with Italian bind off, it just gives the edges of your work a really rounded, beveled look. If you were to complete a traditional bind off, it sort of looks like a row of crisp, more stark crochet stitches at the edge of your work. And it's also not stretchy, so the Italian bind off does give you quite a bit of stretch at the edge of your work, as opposed to a traditional bind off. Let's see. So some notes on the pattern. I have made this pattern once before and I liked that garment, however I did not like the fit of the garment. So when I knit my first step-by-step sweater, I didn't know anything about gauge, so I ended up knitting a sweater that was way too small because I'm a tight knitter. And so I don't get any wear, I don't get any use out of that sweater, but I wish I did because I like the design of the sweater. It just happens to be too small for me because I chose the incorrect size. So I kind of always knew I would knit another one. And once I picked up this yarn from Michaels, I was totally inspired. It was definitely an impulse buy, and it was also an impulse cast on. It didn't take me very long from start to finish, so I cast this on, I believe, it was September 15th, somewhere around there, and I completed it around the same time in October. So it took me from mid-September to mid-October, and so almost exactly a month on the needles. So it worked up very quickly. Usually sweaters take longer than that for me, and I think that's due to the weight of the yarn. I'm not sure if I said this is an Aran weight pattern, and the required needle sizes are 5.5mm for the body and 4.5mm for the ribbing, which are quite large for me as opposed to projects I usually work on usually have a smaller gauge. So I think this larger gauge with the yarn and the needles being bigger than usual just helped me totally breeze through this project. It worked up really fast. This pattern is great for any level of knitter, but particularly beginners because it's very well written, it's very clear, the written pattern is very easy to follow, but the pattern designer also has a full YouTube tutorial where she walks you through every step of the way. So every step of the sweater, she shows you how to do it and walks you through it. It's very comprehensive and it's great for beginners, but it's also great for experienced knitters because it's such a basic pattern that you can really add any modifications very easily. So if I were to knit this again, for example, I would probably include a few more German short rows in the back just because I know that I prefer the collar to sit up a little bit higher, and I also prefer the back of my garments to come a little bit lower in the back as opposed to the front. And I think I could achieve that with adding more short rows in the back. So it's great for any level of knitter because if you're a beginner, It's very simple, easy to follow. There's the visual YouTube tutorial if you need that, but it's good for any sort of intermediate or advanced knitters as well because it's a quick to work up satisfying knit, but it's also a good baseline for any sort of like modifications you might want to try or any new stitches or cabling. Like you can really add anything onto this. It's a very like vanilla sweater pattern. And the pattern is available for free on Ravelry. It's a free Ravelry download, or you can also find it through the YouTube tutorial that I mentioned on Florence Miller's YouTube channel. So basically, if you haven't knit one yet, you should at some point in your knitting career. In my opinion, it's a great pattern. It's easy, it's fun, it's clearly written, good for any level. I personally picked this pattern because, like I said, I wanted to show off the color changes in this yarn, and I knew the plain stockinette body and raglan construction would both be great for highlighting a variegated yarn. But I also am working on an all-over cabled sweater right now, and I was just getting a little bit burnt out from the more intricate construction of that sweater, combined with keeping track of all of the cable repeats that I needed to make. So I was a little bit like in a rut with that. I just wanted something plain stockinette, something quick with a big gauge that would work up relatively quickly. So this pattern checked all of those boxes, and I knew it would look great with this yarn. So yeah, that was my inspiration for this project. So some notes on the yarn. I did use Caron Macchiato Cakes. This is what it looks like in the skein. This is about half a skein. I did use 1.5 for this sweater, but it is worth noting, like I said, I did crop this a lot. So if you were to knit this according to pattern, if you're knitting a size C with the recommended needle sizes and you're meeting gauge for the pattern, you would likely use closer to 2 full skeins of this yarn. But I used 1.5 because I cropped it. This is what it looks like in the skein. It has a lot of really pretty fall color changes. So you can see there's like some deep blue here. There's a lot of like burgundy, like deep red. There is some beige, some tan, there's a lot of gold in there too, and there's even some pops of light blue, which are really pretty. There's one light blue stripe on this sweater that's like my favorite stripe. I think it's this, yeah, it's this one. I just love that color. They all really complement each other and they're all perfect for fall. So I love this yarn. I feel festive. I wear this sweater almost every day, I swear. Like this is my go-to top right now, so I'm getting a lot of use out of it. This is a number 5 bulky weight yarn. I'll show you what it looks like close up. It is a single ply yarn, so that just means it's one single ply of roving that's twisted over itself. So this is what it looks like in like a single strand, and what it looks like in the skein. You can see it has sort of like a halo fuzziness effect to it. There are a lot of fibers that stick out and create this fuzzy effect on this yarn. I was a little bit nervous about the structural integrity of this because I've never worked with a single ply yarn before, and there were some instances, especially during the Italian bind off, because you have to weave the same strand of yarn like through the stitches over and over again. And during those instances, since there was so much friction on the same section of yarn, it did start to fray and sort of like, it got really fuzzy and it frayed a lot. I'll put a picture up so you can see. I took some pictures for reference. At that point I was worried like it might come apart, it might break, and I was worried like, oh, I'm gonna have to attach a new piece of yarn, which halfway through an Italian bind off, it's like, it's possible, like you can do it, but it's just one of those things that's kind of annoying that you want to avoid. So anyway, I was worried at that point that maybe the single pliedness was not great, but it did hold up. So I will say it is stronger than I thought. Other than that, I didn't really have any issues with this yarn. I will say it's like a little bit splitty, but I think that's just because of the way that I stab my needle in to make a stitch. I don't think it's the yarn's fault. I think that's something that's sort of like relative to every knitter. But I will say for me personally, it was a little bit splitty because it is a single ply. It is composed of 80% acrylic and 20% wool. So that's another thing that gave me a little bit of pause with this yarn. I'm not crazy about acrylic yarn, and it's just because I've crocheted a sweater with 100% acrylic yarn previously. It was the Lion brand Heartland yarn. It's just like, it's not a comfortable fabric, so that sweater is very stuffy feeling, and it makes me sweaty, but not in like a hot way. It's sort of like in a clammy way, which is uncomfortable. I don't enjoy that feeling very much. So the sweater does not keep me warm, but it does make me sweaty. So It's just not very comfortable. So once I had experienced that with a sweater, I kind of figured like, oh, I think that's just what acrylic yarn feels like, because I've heard people mention that it also feels that way for them as well. One of the viewers in my previous video commented that they would describe it as not a breathable fabric, like it doesn't breathe well, and I would totally agree with that first sweater. However, I will say that even though this is composed of 80% acrylic, I do not get that stuffy feeling at all with this fabric. So I don't get that like clammy, sweaty feeling. I don't feel stuffy in this. It is warm, and but it's not itchy at all. So I am on the more sensitive side when it comes to wool. I do experience like itchiness and prickliness, I think more so than like the average person. So I was a little bit nervous about that as well, because this does have 20% wool content, and it doesn't state that it's any specific type of wool, which usually means it's going to be a little bit itchier, because it could be from anywhere. But this one, I don't experience any prickliness, any itchiness. I also don't have any stuffiness or clamminess from the acrylic content. So it's sort of a perfect fabric. I really enjoy it. It's very comfortable. I can wear it next to skin, and I can wear it all day with like no issues. So I enjoy this yarn. It's also soft, which is worth noting. The care instructions for the yarn are to hand wash and lay flat to dry. So I did just use a typical blocking process for this garment. And just a quick rundown of what I usually do for blocking is I just fill my kitchen sink with, well, I clean my sink first, but then I fill it with like lukewarm, room temperature-ish water and a couple drops of wool wash. And I stick the garment in there, and I just kind of like agitate it enough to where the garment is fully saturated with the water. And then I just let it sit for 20 minutes. Once it's soaked for 20 minutes, I take it out and I throw it into my washing machine in the drain and spin cycle, which just spins the barrel really fast and drains out all the water. Once it's done that in the washer, I take it out and I lay it flat, and it dried pretty quickly, like I would say half a day. It was completely dry. Oh, another random note is I pulled my first skein or cake from the center, just because I was like, that's just what you do. And there was also like a little end sticking out right from the center, and I was like, oh, that's convenient. But when I got about like 2/3 of the way through the skein, it collapsed in on itself and just created like a ton of tangles. It was really like difficult to use, because every couple of inches or so I would have to stop and then like detangle the yarn, and then I could keep going, and then I would run into another tangle, so I'd have to stop and detangle and keep going. So at that point I did completely stop, and I just took the yarn and wound it into a ball. So with the second skein, I actually pulled from the outside because I found that was a lot more convenient. So that's everything I have for my step-by-step sweater. I am totally happy with this finished object, with this finished garment. Like I said, I get a ton of wear out of this. I love the fit, I love the yarn, everything about it I would totally recommend. So it was also very affordable. It was $12.99 per skein at Michael's. So if you're looking for an affordable, like 80% acrylic, 20% wool, soft yarn to knit up a step-by-step sweater or any errand or bulky weight project with, I would totally recommend this. But yeah, I would also recommend the pattern as well. It's a great pattern. Next up is my Sandro Pullover. This is by Flaminia Loracini. The Sandro Pullover is a DK weight drop shoulder sweater. It is all over cables, but the cables are nice and spaced out, which I love because I wanted to complete a cable knit sweater, but I knew I didn't want to be overwhelmed by the cables. So I like that they are every other row, and they're also like quite a few rows apart, the actual cable repeats, so you're not constantly doing cable repeats. It does have an oversized fit with a recommended positive ease of 26.5 to 33 centimeters, which is roughly 10.5 to 13 inches. So pretty oversized. It does also feature a few decreases along the sleeves, so it has oversized sleeves as well. It does have 1x1 rib details. It features a folded collar and 1x1 rib sleeve cuffs and hemline of the sweater, and Italian bind off at all the edges. As for modifications, I did accidentally make a modification to this. If you'll notice here, I skipped a cable repeat on the left shoulder. I guess it's my left, maybe your guys' is right, I don't know. But yeah, you can see I skipped a cable repeat on accident here, and I only noticed that after blocking. But I kind of like it because it gives it like a one-of-a-kind quality. Like, there's probably no other Sandro Pullover out there that is missing one singular cable repeat on the left shoulder. So about the blocking, so as I mentioned, I have already blocked this, and that is thanks to a viewer with my previous podcast episode. Shout out to you for suggesting that I block this midway through. I have never thought to block a project before I finished it, but this really needed it, because if you watched my previous episode, I mentioned that I'm concerned about the fit of this sweater, because before I blocked it, it was very small. So it almost looked like a tank top on me, because the edge of the drop shoulder edge, I think it came to like here, which is before the end of my natural shoulder. So anyway, I was very concerned about the fit, and the more I worked on it, the more I was feeling like, I don't know if I should keep going, because I have a feeling that this is going to be too small. So when I mentioned that in my previous episode, a viewer commented that you should just block it and see if it fits. That way you know if you need to unravel, or like if you can just keep going. So that was very helpful. Thank you to you. I blocked it, and it does indeed fit as I want it to, so I can keep going, it gives me a lot of peace of mind, and it also gives me like a refreshed motivation to keep working on this. Once I was hesitant about the size, I noticed that I kind of like stopped picking this up altogether, because I was like so scared of it not fitting that I was like, I don't even want to look at that right now. Like, I'm just gonna put it away and not think about it for a while. But once I blocked it, I do feel much more motivated to work on it, and yeah, I'm glad I did. All I did was I took the stitches off the needles, because they do have metal. The point of the needle that connects to the cable is metal, and I wasn't sure if that would be an issue with like rust or anything. So I took all the stitches off, or I took the needles and the cables off and put it on some scrap yarn. And then yeah, I blocked it, took it out, dried it, everything, and it grew so much. So I think the combined factor of it being cabled, which I didn't realize cables like cinch in the fabric so much, but the fact that it was cabled and the fact that this is superwash yarn. So I'll get to the yarn details in a minute, but this is superwash, which I've heard from other knitters, like more experienced knitters, that superwash tends to grow a lot when you block it, but I didn't know it would grow this much. So it did grow a lot. It grew very significantly. I wish I would have measured it so I could tell you like exactly how much it grew, but it grew. So far I am liking this pattern. I will say it is a bit of a challenge. It's not challenging in the way that it's hard, but it's just a complex design compared to what I'm normally knitting. It is a drop shoulder, and it does have European shoulder construction, so that just means that you start at the back and you knit the back yoke in this trapezoid shape, so with the sloped shoulders, and then you knit the back yoke, and then you put those stitches at rest. You come to the front, and one at a time you pick up the stitches at the shoulder seam, and then you knit over the shoulder, and then you join here at the bottom of the neckline, and then at that point you knit down the entire front yoke, and then when you get to the bottom of the armhole you join the front and back yokes, and then you're working in the round for the body. So it's a lot of like stopping and starting, putting your stitches on like a scrap yarn and then picking up other stitches in other places. So it's just a lot of keeping track of things, and then meanwhile you're also keeping track of all of the cable repeats, you're making increases, and then you're having to knit and purl because you're working these technically flat, so you're knitting and purling as opposed to working in the round. You have to make different increases on the knit side versus the purl side. It's complicated, it's complex. So, but it's not hard, it's not difficult, it's just complex. And that's sort of what led me to the burnout with this pattern, where I just needed to take a break. I also was worried about the fit, so like all of those factors combined just led me to sort of like not want to work on this for a while. But now that I'm past all of the like complex construction stuff, I'm just working in the round on the body. I've blocked it, so I know that it fits. I'm way more motivated to work on this, and it's a lot more enjoyable to me. The yarn itself is also very enjoyable. It's very soft. It's a superwash yarn, as I mentioned, and it's also very drapey. So especially once I blocked it, it's very, very drapey, very pretty. I'm a little bit concerned about the softness of the yarn because I've heard that softer yarn tends to pill a lot more, so only time will tell. I guess I'll have to see once I finish this project and start wearing it, but other than that, the yarn is great. I'm using Knit Picks Swish DK Weight in the color Nutmeg Heather. It is mostly a neutral tanny beige color, and it does have like very slight tonality, which gives it that heather effect, but it's very subtle. It's not dramatic at all. It is a number 3 DK weight, and it's 100% fine superwash merino wool. The care instructions for this yarn are to machine wash cold and tumble dry low, which I will not be doing. I don't know why it scares me to machine wash anything. I do machine wash my socks, but this yarn is so soft. I feel like if I were to throw it in the washing machine, it would like get really, like the agitation from the washing machine would be like a lot on this fabric, but I don't know, maybe I'm just paranoid. Anybody who has experience and knows more than me, feel free to educate me in the comments, but to me that sounds scary. But yeah, I still have quite a ways to go. Now that I've completed the step-by-step sweater, I do have a lot of renewed ambition with this, and I think it's going to work up a lot faster from here on out. Hopefully I have a lot more of an update to share in my next episode. I do have one new cast on for this month, and that is the Broken Record Broken Rib socks. I am knitting these with Knit Picks Stroll in the color Hollyberry. This is what it looks like in the skein. It's not really picking up true to life on camera. It's much deeper, at least in the viewfinder. It looks like really bright and sort of a lighter red, but in real life it's like much deeper, and it's definitely more of a pinky toned red, I think, than it's showing up on camera. A burgundy kind of. And this pattern, the Broken Record Broken Rib socks, is a broken rib, all over broken rib sock, so you can see, which just means the ribbing is every other round. So you do one round in the rib pattern, and then the next round is just completely knit. So it gives it that sort of like jog in the ribbing. It just makes a really pretty texture. So as you can see, this does feature 1x1 ribbing at the cuff of the sock, and then it has that broken rib pattern for the cuff. I haven't gotten to this part yet, but it does feature a heel flap and gusset. And then I'm not sure how the toe is, but I believe it's just decreases and then you Kitchener stitch the toe together at the end. So far I'm really loving this. I was a little bit worried about the broken rib pattern because sometimes it can be a little bit difficult, not difficult, but it can be a little bit strenuous on my hands to purl on the 9-inch circulars, which by the way, these are ChiaoGoo 2.25 millimeter 9-inch circulars, which are all I use for socks. So I was a little worried that doing so much purling would be uncomfortable on the 9-inch circulars, but I haven't had an issue this far. So far it's totally comfortable. It's working up pretty quick. These have only been on the needles for about 3 or 4 days now, and this is how much progress I've made. And I really only have like 30 minutes a day to knit, so they're working up pretty quick. So far I like these, and I am knitting the size medium. I don't know if I mentioned that. The yarn itself is Knit Picks Stroll. This is what it looks like in the entire skein. It is 75% fine superwash merino wool and 25% nylon, and the care instructions are machine wash cold and tumble dry low. And the color is Hollyberry. This yarn is so soft. So I have a confession to make. So in my previous podcast episodes, I discussed the socks that I have made with Patton's Croy sock yarn. And I did mention that that yarn, although it's not soft, I did state that it's also not rough. It is rough. So I think this is what normal sock yarn is supposed to feel like. Either that or this is just extremely soft sock yarn. Either way, in comparison, the Patton's Croy sock is so rough compared to this. This is like a dream. It's so soft. It just feels like so much more fine than the Patton's Croy sock. And although I will say I do still agree with my past self that the Patton's Croy sock is a good workhorse yarn for socks, I will redact my previous statements and say that it is pretty rough. It is rough. Because this is soft. I think I didn't know what a true sock yarn was supposed to feel like until I worked with this one. So either this is like extremely soft or the Patton's Croy sock is rougher than I thought. That's all the notes I have for my Broken Record Broken Rib socks. This is my progress so far, and hopefully I have more to share next time. I do have a few yarn acquisitions, so I'll get into those now. First up is the Patton's Classic Wool Worsted in the color Bright Red, and this I picked up at my local Michael's. It's relatively affordable. I believe it was around $7 a skein. I got this for my daughter. She's really into the Little House on the Prairie picture books right now, and in the book, Laura, the main character, and her older sister Mary, they receive pairs of knitted red wool mittens for Christmas, and so my daughter also wanted some red mittens, so I told her I would knit some. It is quickly, like winter is very quickly approaching here in Denver. For the past 2 years, our first snows of the season have been like either right before Halloween or right after Halloween, which as of recording this, Halloween is next weekend, so I gotta get these done. One last thing, the content of this yarn is 100% pure new wool. I have used this yarn before. I did knit my daughters some wool mittens with this same yarn in a different colorway last year, and I will say it is a little bit itchy. I would not use this for a garment, and it also is notorious for knots, which I didn't realize until I got home, but this skein already has like 2 pretty big knots that I can see from the outside of the skein, which is a lot. Which, if you're new to knitting or you're unfamiliar, in order to maintain like consistency and continuity in your stitches, you should undo the knot and then like weave in the ends so that there's not like a big giant knot sticking out. Because also, in theory, it could unravel and undo your stitches, but it could also just create like an ugly looking stitch, because a lot of the times the knots will work their way out to the front of the work, even if you try to hide them in the back. So if you want like a nice flat fabric that doesn't show any bulges or knots, you should clip these manufacturing knots and then weave in the ends. So it's just a little bit of a nuisance when you run into these while you're knitting. I personally just keep going usually because I'm lazy, but if you're trying to make your fabric very professional and very clean looking, you should probably clip these and then weave in the ends. So that's why they're bad. But I don't know, with my 2-year-old and 1-year-old's knitted mittens, I don't think that'll be a big issue, but it's worth noting. Next up, I have 2 skeins of this Hobby Lobby I Love This yarn, 100% acrylic in the color brown. Just brown. My daughter picked this out. I took her to Hobby Lobby to pick out yarn for a sweater. I was thinking like she's probably gonna pick out one of like the pretty rainbow colors or like sparkly, like pink. She just likes that stuff. So I was kind of like shocked and surprised that she wanted brown, but she picked brown. Out of all the colors, she was like, I want the brown. So I got brown. I even asked her like, okay, what do you think your sister wants? And she was like, oh, she wants brown too. So I got 2 skeins of this so I can knit a sweater for my 2.5-year-old and for my 1.5-year-old. And I did pick this because they're toddlers, so they're pretty messy, as you can imagine, and 100% acrylic. This is just something I can like throw into the wash without thinking. I can also throw it in the dryer without thinking. It's not high maintenance at all. It's very low maintenance. So those are my yarn acquisitions. That's everything I have for this episode. So if you stuck around this long, thank you for watching. I know I mentioned in my previous episodes that my goal was to record and upload these roughly every 2 weeks. I have not been able to maintain that deadline. I think a more realistic timeline would be like monthly probably. And if I can fit, more in here and there, that would be great. But for right now, I'm gonna shoot for monthly for these podcast updates. But I do appreciate you watching. Feel free to like or subscribe if you're into this kind of thing, or if you have something you'd like to share, drop me a comment. But yeah, that's all I have this time. I hope you guys have a great month. I hope you have a happy Halloween, and I'll see you guys next time.